Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. My guest today is broadcasting all the way from Costa Rica, and we're going to find out what she's doing there. She's a plant-based doctor. I'm meeting her for the first time. Her name is Dr. Miranda Graham, and she's going to be talking about medicinal mushrooms. And I can't wait to hear this talk because if you watch me regularly, you know, I'm pretty flexible and open-minded with eating, but mushrooms are one thing that I just have never liked. So hopefully today's talk will influence me enough that I'm going to start including them regularly in my diet. Please welcome Dr. Graham. It's very nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me, Chef AJ. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is my pleasure. I'm just curious, what time is it now in Costa Rica?
It is 12:09 p.m.
Oh, so it's not late at night. So this is a good time for you. Good.
Yeah, this is a good time. It's only 1 hour time difference with California.
That's fantastic. Then I got to have more guests on from Costa Rica. I have problems like Australia and India. It's not a good time for them. So I'm glad that this doesn't affect you negatively either way. So how the heck did you end up in Costa Rica? But maybe first, how did you become interested in plant-based eating?
Well, I became interested in plant-based eating actually after I graduated from medical school. It wasn't until I was already done. But coming to Costa Rica actually happened way before then. I grew up in Arizona, and then when I was about 13, my parents decided to come on an adventure and move down to Costa Rica. And they just sold our house and moved us down here. And it was a really interesting time. I learned Spanish very quickly. I started medical school at a young age. When I finished medical school, I decided to stay here in Costa Rica and practice medicine here. But throughout medical school, I was a vegan. I was an ethical vegan, but I followed a very unhealthy diet and a very unhealthy lifestyle. I studied many hours, was very sedentary, was very stressed, ate a lot of fried vegan food, and a lot of processed foods. And then when I was finishing medical school with my internship and everything, I started learning about plant-based nutrition. I actually watched Forks Over Knives, and that documentary changed my life. And I changed my diet. I lost about 60 pounds.
That's incredible. Because, when I meet people slender, I have trouble visualizing them heavy. Do you have a photo by any chance? Because you look great and you don't even.
Oh yeah, I have pictures that I can share. Yep. But Yep. So I don't have pictures at my heaviest, but I have pictures when I was much heavier. But yeah, so I changed my diet. In the beginning, I was very influenced by the starch diet Dr. McDougall's diet. And one of your speeches was one of the first that I saw when I was trying to figure out what to eat. It was from fat vegan to skinny bitch. And I really identified with that because throughout my career, people would always be shocked that I was a vegan because they thought that vegans had to be skinny, and that's not always necessarily the case. But I was having health issues. So when I switched over to a plant-based diet, I lost weight. I felt a lot better. I felt a lot healthier. And I decided to dedicate my career to helping other people transition their diet to this, or their whole lifestyle, really.
That's great. Is that what you do in Costa Rica with your patients?
Yep. I mostly work with vegans who are interested in being healthy, preventing nutrient deficiencies, but I also work with a lot of older patients who are trying to reverse chronic disease, and it's very successful. Sometimes it can seem really strict in the beginning. So we have to do a slower transition, but especially when people can go from one day to another, when they can change their diet overnight, they can get really quick results. I have helped people lower their lipid blood panels extremely quickly in just about 2 weeks, lowering it by 50%, the LDL anyways.
That's great. Do you see people virtually, in person, in the office, both?
I see both. I see a lot of patients online and a lot of patients in person as well.
Does someone have to live in Costa Rica to be your patient?
No, not at all. But when somebody lives in Costa Rica, I have more control over what I can help them with, pharmaceuticals that I can prescribe, tests that I can send, although I can request those things and I can talk to people's physicians in other countries and that sort of thing. But it is better for people to be in Costa Rica for me to attend to them. And that way I can also do a physical exam, which can be important most of the time.
Is there a lot of interest in eating plants in Costa Rica?
Yeah, there is a lot of interest there. We have a Costa Rican vegan Facebook group with about 20,000 people, and we do vegan festivals. And there was just actually a vegan festival this Sunday where I presented at, and we had a great turnout with like 300 people, everyone with masks on and everything and washing their hands. But it is getting a lot more popular. When I first went vegan, that was about in 2007. There were not many vegan options here in Costa Rica, besides like staples like beans and rice and Boca burgers. Boca burgers were about the only thing I could eat, but now I can't even eat them because I ate so many when I was in high school. But now there's so many options.
Right. There are. I've had a few guests from Costa Rica on. Do you know Ryan Flegel or Sherry Soria?
No, I don't know them.
Okay.
But I do know a lot of vegan healthcare professionals here. I am actually one of the co-founders of the Costa Rican Association for Lifestyle Medicine, and we are working towards changing the focus of the Costa Rican healthcare system towards a plant-based diet and lifestyle changes and preventive care.
Well, so there's a lifestyle medicine community in Costa Rica, medical professionals.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic.
Yep. Yeah, we're actually just getting everything started, but something that we're really excited about, and hopefully will grow over the next few years, and we'll be able to influence policy and systemic change.
Oh, this is a funny question I have to ask from Gina. The biggest question: do you have Hana yams or Japanese sweet potatoes in Costa Rica?
So there are like a type of sweet potato here called camote. It's a little different than yams or sweet potatoes in other countries. They're like have like a pinkish purple outside with like a white interior, and they are pretty sweet though, and they're really good. You can get yams. I have never seen Japanese yams here though.
Have you ever had them though? Maybe you've been outside Costa Rica lately. Have you ever had them?
Theirs are the purple ones, right?
Well, yeah, the Japanese are purple on the outside, kind of a cream beigey whitish color on the inside.
Yeah, okay. I have had those.
They're pretty good, aren't they?
But yeah, they're delicious. But I have not seen them here exactly. Here they have what's called camote, which is very similar.
Nice. I love the fact that you're an ethical vegan first, because we have an audience that is often full of ethical vegans, and they always seem to ask that question. Mm-hmm. So you had that piece first, but like me, you were a junk food vegan. How is what you were eating then different than what you're eating now?
Oh, it was completely different. I would go for convenience first, always. Like something had to be vegan. As long as it was vegan, I would pretty much eat it. Basically, that was it. I ate a lot of just like chips and fries. I drank alcohol, in college. A lot of fries, honestly, and a lot of foods just with, when you eat out at restaurants, it's a lot of oil that doesn't really need to be there, that kind of thing. A lot of sodium and a lot of processed sugars and flours. When I was in medical school, doctors would talk about how bad carbohydrates were for you. And I became like afraid of carbohydrates. And I didn't even consider that my problem was oil, not the carbohydrates that I was eating. Until I watched Forks Over Knives, and that really changed my outlook on it completely. And then I realized it was actually, I wouldn't say it was, I guess it was easy for me because I was already used to eating vegan. So the change from vegan to a whole food plant-based diet was much easier than going from eating a standard American diet to eating whole food plant-based. But I feel like just removing the oil was the biggest factor for me, especially with the last 20 pounds, probably.
That is just, how long ago did you graduate medical school, and where did you go?
I went to a university in Costa Rica called UCIMED. That's Universidad de Ciencias Médicas. That's the University of Medical Sciences. And I graduated in 2000. I did my internship in 2015 and then graduated right after that in 2016.
I mean, that is unbelievable that they're teaching the same thing in medical schools outside of the US, that carbs are bad. And when oil is, at least with diabetes and other diseases too, like obesity, really the problem. I mean, have you straightened out your professors?
That's actually one of the things that we're working on doing right now with the association, with the Costa Rican Association for Lifestyle Medicine, is that we are trying to implement lifestyle medicine in universities because it's actually not taught at all. We get very little training in nutrition. Unfortunately, our medical schools here have a lot of influence from the United States, especially American pharmaceutical companies. So I took a lot of pharmacology and not enough nutrition. Probably the only nutrition that I saw throughout my career was in biochemistry. And then, later on when we would do internal medicine and talk about diabetes, they would talk about sugar, but never, and like sugar, of course, is not going to help people with diabetes, but that's not the problem. The problem is the lipids. And that is something that seems so important for every physician to know. And they're teaching us the same way, basically, that they teach American doctors. So we're working on changing that. But it'll be slow change.
Are you bilingual? Were the classes in English or another language?
No, all the classes were in Spanish. I learned Spanish when I was in high school, thankfully. And then I had a little bit of difficulty with Spanish still when I was starting medical school. Medical school here is structured a little bit differently than it is in the United States. Instead of 4 years of pre-med and then 4 years of medical school, it's about 6 years of the two combined. So the first 2 years of medical school, I guess I was technically in like pre-medical school, taking like biology, chemistry. So those courses, the first 2 years were the most difficult. And then after that, when my language skills getting better, it was a lot easier for me.
Do you like living in Costa Rica?
I love it. The weather where I live is beautiful. I live in the valley and we have a very nice climate. We don't use air conditioning or heat most of the year. So that's a really nice perk of living here.
Wow, that's neat. Did any of your family or friends join you when you became vegan? Or maybe now that you're a doctor, they should listen to you?
So actually that is a big topic in my family. I'm constantly talking about the benefits of a plant-based diet. And so a lot of them want to become vegan, but they have problems. It's hard for them to stop eating meat, basically. I think it's mostly the taste and the convenience factors. When I'm with them, I can cook them vegan food and they like it. For example, I've cooked for both of my mother's parents, and I've gotten my grandpa off of a lot of his medications, but when I'm not around him, he won't eat that way. And he goes back on his medications after I leave, come back to work and vacation's over.
Oh, boy, that's something. So why the interest in mushrooms?
So I think that it is an extremely important topic that we are not talking about that often. I mean, there is some more scientific information coming out in the recent years, but it's something that has medicinal mushrooms are something that have been around for thousands of years. And since there's no real profit motive from a pharmacological standpoint, because it's not something that can be patented, it's something that's brushed aside and not taught about in school or talked about amongst physicians at all, even though we know that mushrooms have such benefits for health. A lot of the pharmaceutical agents that we use in medicine come from fungi, like penicillin, cephalosporin. So antibiotics, cancer medications can come from fungi. Immunosuppressants that are used in patients who are going through organ transplants are made from fungi as well. So we know that they have really potent effects in the body. But when it comes to everyday mushrooms that we can buy ourselves in form of supplementation, or that can even be foraged, we don't really talk about that as much. And there's a lot of fear around mushrooms as well, since there are some that are poisonous. But with a little bit of knowledge around the topic, we can kind of get over that fear and incorporate that into our daily lives. And as you were saying earlier, about not necessarily liking mushrooms, there are some mushrooms that you can eat that are very edible and tasty, and as I call them, like gourmet culinary mushrooms, like shiitake, maitake, portobello mushrooms, but they're not necessarily as healthy as some other functional fungi or medicinal mushrooms, that you don't even really need to like the taste, because you can take them as supplements or teas, or so you can bypass that part of mushrooms.
Yeah. Just because I always thought they were creepy, because I see them, just growing in the ground, and I don't know why I have, such a aversion to them. But so hopefully by the end of this show, you'll be able to convince me to try them. So Jill Nussenow, who's a very well-known plant-based registered dietitian, is saying, I am a mushroom lover and a mushroom forager. I've been recommending them for more than 15 years professionally.
That's amazing. Yeah. There are several types of mushrooms that are commonly found in menus and in the grocery store and at farmers markets, like for example, portobello, cremini, and button mushrooms, which are actually all the same species of mushroom. They're just different maturities of the same species. So like button mushroom is less mature, and then portobello is like the more mature form. And then shiitake, which is very common in Japanese and Chinese cooking, enoki and oyster mushrooms, which are also very healthful. But what I really wanted to talk about more beyond those, which do have a lot of health benefits in general. They have a lot of fiber, antioxidants, protein, B vitamins. They're low in calories and fat and sodium, which makes them very, it's okay to like pig out on them if you want. There are beta glucans, which are polysaccharides that have beta linkages that interact with our immune system and act as prebiotics. So they support our gut flora by being prebiotics. And they're prebiotics because we can't necessarily digest the polysaccharides in mushrooms, but our intestinal flora can. They can also enhance the natural killer activity cells, so like in our immune system, and which slows down the tumor cell growth if we have cancerous cells in our bodies. And these beta glucans can be extracted from the mushrooms with hot water. So that's where like the teas come from and the powders come from. And then there are other substances called triterpenes, which are compounds that are lipid soluble, which need to be extracted with alcohol. And they have antimicrobial effects, anti-inflammatory effects, and anti-cancer effects. And when you talk about mushrooms that have both of these products in them, they have something called dual extraction. Dual extraction, taking out both of these active compounds from the cell wall of the mushroom. So what they do is they extract these products, and then they put it into like a powder form by taking out all the water. And then they encapsulate those, or you can just buy the powder, or you can buy tinctures with the alcohol. Beyond the mushrooms that we were talking about, the ones that are generally sold in the store and in cooking, there are 5 medicinal mushrooms that I really wanted to talk about because they're so helpful, and especially in the United States, it's pretty easy to access them with online shopping. In Costa Rica, it's not as they're not as easy to find necessarily, because here we kind of have a more difficult process approving anything that's going to be sold as a supplement. It takes years to get these products on the market, but in the United States, they're widely available. But these are adaptogens, which means that they have a stimulant effect without having a crash like you have with caffeine, let's say. They can help your body adapt to stress. They're non-habit forming, which means that they're not addictive, basically, and they can help your body restore balance. And they can have non-specific effects in the body, which can make scientific trials very difficult because it's hard to quantify exact individual biomarkers. But when you look at the overall effects of the mushrooms, they are very beneficial. The first one of these that I would like to talk about is reishi. In traditional Chinese medicine, this is called the mushroom of spirit. It's Ganoderma lucidum, and it's known for, in traditional Chinese medicine, it's known for being the mushroom of strength, health, and longevity. It has a lot of antioxidants. It has a lot of beta-glucans and triterpenes. The main one is ganoderic acid, which actually has a very bitter taste, which is why the teas might not be, reishi tea might not be the best option for people who don't like bitter flavors. But there are 100 different types of triterpenes in reishi, which all have very positive effects in the body. And they also have sterols like ergosterol, which is a precursor for vitamin D, which makes it one of the few vegan sources of vitamin D in the diet. Reishi is extremely beneficial for the immune system. It can also be an adjunct therapy for cancer patients. It can help with the side effects from treatment and can also augment the effects of chemotherapy and radiation. It increases natural killer cell production. It increases a cell-mediated response from T cells and the humoral response from B cells, which is antibody production, basically. The anti-inflammatory effect from the increased cytokine production in cases of chronic inflammation. So we have acute inflammation, right? And chronic inflammation. Acute inflammation is good. It's when we need to damage tissue that's been injured. But chronic inflammation is what can be causing us damage long-term. And this can help with chronic inflammation. It can help with cardiovascular health by lowering blood lipid levels, so LDL cholesterol, and it can help increase HDL cholesterol. It can decrease lipid peroxidation, which is basically oxidation of the plaques that are formed in the arteries. So it can prevent, eating reishi can help prevent a cardiovascular event. It can also help as a sleep aid because the triterpenes in reishi can have a sedative effect. So it can also help with symptoms of depression and anxiety, and it can have an antimicrobial effect as an adjunct therapy for herpes simplex virus and some other infections. So that's it's one of the reishi is one of the most widely used mushrooms in traditional Chinese medicine, and now it's becoming more and more commonly used in the West as well. The next one is chaga, which is actually not technically a mushroom, because when you talk about mushroom, that's the fruiting body of a fungi, but it is actually it's actually from the mycelium of the mushroom, or of the fungi. And it's extremely difficult to cultivate. It has a 3 to 5 year life cycle because of the way that it grows, basically. But it's kind of one of the more commonly foraged fungi in North America. It has benefits from dual extraction as well, so with hot water and from alcohol. And this is one of the mushrooms that has the highest oxygen radical absorbance capacity, which is an ORAC value. Which means that it counteracts free radicals, having anti-aging effects, anti-cancer effects, and cardiovascular protection. This is the reason that it's called the king of functional mushrooms. And it's a prebiotic as well, because it helps aid the intestinal flora. The next one is my personal favorite, which is lion's mane, which is Hericium erinaceus. Sorry, the Latin names are a little hard to remember. But the lion's mane, it's a beautiful mushroom that looks like a lion's mane, and it can actually be cooked, and it has like a good flavor. But when you eat the whole mushroom, you don't necessarily get all of the health benefits. It's better to extract the active compounds. And I take a supplement for this every day. It helps with cognitive function and focus, because it has diterpenoid erinacines that cross the blood-brain barrier. And this can support a nerve growth factor synthesis, which is super important for growth and neuroplasticity. And this is especially important because nerve tissue is what's considered to be stable and permanent. So it's extremely difficult for nerve tissue to regenerate once it's been damaged. So this is something that can help with that. They're theorizing that this can help with symptoms of multiple sclerosis, although it hasn't been clinically proven yet. It can potentially support the growth of axons and dendrites, which are part of the neurons. There are clinical studies done in humans that do support the topic of the cognitive benefits that they have. And this is another mushroom that has the benefits from dual extraction. It also has health benefits for the gut, but the benefits from this are seen over time more so than immediately. So it's something that should be taken over a longer period of time, so you get an accumulative effect over the course of months or years. The next one is Cordyceps, which is called the zombie mushroom because it can be endoparasitic, which means that it uses insects. Like it basically takes over insects' bodies and uses their bodies as a starting off point for growth, which is really interesting, I think. But it can also have a lot of health benefits depending on the species. So Cordyceps militaris has a lot of health benefits. It is called the athlete's mushroom because it increases energy and endurance, because it is a nucleotide. It has a nucleotide analog called cordycepin, which is similar to adenosine, which is in ATP. So everyone might remember ATP from biology classes in high school or in college. So it increases ATP in the Krebs cycle, and it decreases lactic acid buildup, and it can increase glycogen storage in the liver. So all of this improves oxygen metabolism capacity and efficiency. So this would be a great option for athletes to take every day as a supplement. And then with the Cordyceps militaris, we also have that it can be an adjunct asthma therapy. And they have seen that people who have asthma, severe asthma, improve their quality of life and their lung function taking Cordyceps militaris. And they've also seen that it can have a calming effect. It's an adaptogenic agent, and it has nitric oxide regulation. And taking the supplement in the morning may be preferred because it can have an energizing effect. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's just that when you use a word like adaptogenic, I don't think everyone knows what that means.
Oh, so adaptogenic is when earlier I was talking about how as adaptogens, they can have a stimulant effect without having a crash, that they can have immunomodulatory effects. So basically it can increase your immune system in certain ways or decrease it in other ways, depending on what your body needs, basically.
Thank you.
So no problem. And then, so, and another thing is that this can have so another way that it's an adaptogen is that it can have a calming effect or an energizing effect, depending on your state when you're taking it, basically. Kind of brings you back to like a baseline of normal, if you're like swinging either way. the thing is with Cordyceps militaris is that it has a very strong flavor. So the capsules may be preferred over like the teas or the powders. Some of these powders of mushrooms you can put in soups or smoothies or coffee even, but this one, it's more, it's probably better to take it in a capsule. That way you don't have to taste it. And you can take 1 to 2 grams of this per day. And then we have turkey tail, which it has really been found to have anti-cancer effects. One of the most beneficial parts of it are beta D glucans, which are also adaptogenic. It has an earthy flavor. It's not bitter, so it's very palatable in like soups or dal, or it can be really covered up by a smoothie. I drink a lot of smoothies and I throw it in there sometimes. Double extraction is not required in this because it doesn't have the liposoluble compounds we were talking about. They're just water soluble, but it has polysaccharide peptides and a compound called crestin, which is an adjunct to cancer therapy. And they've shown that the life expectancy and quality of life in patients with breast cancer improves while taking crestin or other compounds in turkey tail. It also has a lot of antioxidants, and it can be a great prebiotic like some of the other mushrooms that we were talking about. And if anyone is interested in any of the studies that I talked about, or any of the information that I got from studies, I can share the slides with them. And yeah, that's mostly what I wanted to talk about. If there are any questions, I can.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's been a bunch of questions, so let me find them. I remember one from Mandy. She says, do mushrooms have to be cooked? Because I believe Dr. Furman says that if they're raw, they're toxic. And yet I've had raw food chefs on the show that are using mushrooms. So is that dangerous?
So most mushrooms do need to be cooked. It's very difficult to clean mushrooms because when you're using water, it acts kind of like a sponge and absorbs the water instead of getting like washed off like vegetables would. So that's one reason to cook them. The only one I think that you can go without cooking are like the button mushrooms, but all of the other ones should be cooked. And I still cook my button mushrooms. I used to eat them raw, but now I always cook them. And it's much more easy to get all of the beneficial factors for mushrooms when they're cooked anyways.
Right. Do they still have benefits if you air fry them? Because that's the only way I like them. I think it's because I don't like wet food. Like I don't like oatmeal. I don't like it's the texture. But when I air fry them with pepperoni spice, then I can eat them okay.
Yeah, you can definitely air fry them. I love my air fryer too.
Yeah, Gina's saying you're so knowledgeable about mushrooms, you should write a book.
Maybe I will. I have a 3-year-old, so when she's a little bigger, I'm sure I will have a lot more time to write a book.
Yeah, wow, 3-year-old. You don't even look like you're old enough to. I think you look like you're in high school. You look amazing. Wow, you have a kid. Is your kid plant-based?
Yeah, she is.
From birth.
I had a total vegan pregnancy. When I was pregnant, I gave myself permission to eat basically anything I wanted to, as long as it was vegan. But I still did have a much healthier diet than the vast majority of people. But because I was not able to eat for the first 4 months of my pregnancy because I had such bad nausea. So I was actually very thin. And then I gained probably about 20 pounds during my pregnancy. But even during my pregnancy, I did not go back to the weight I was before I switched over to a plant-based diet.
Right. So was it about 60 pounds heavier, you said?
I was about 60 pounds heavier, yes.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations. Are you familiar with a Netflix documentary called Fantastic Fungi?
Actually, I've not seen it, but I have heard of it, and I will have to watch it.
Yeah. Gina says, can we get a list of names of these mushrooms so we can write them down and look them up?
Absolutely. I will share. I can share this presentation I was going to give, but I had some technical difficulties, but I can give you the list. I'll say again the names of the 5 medicinal ones that I was talking about, which were Reishi. That's Reishi. The next was Chaga, which is Chaga. The next was lion's mane. Then we have Cordyceps, which was Cordyceps. And the last one was turkey tail, like because it looks like the tail of a turkey, basically.
That's interesting. Wow. We can put anything you want in the show notes too. 20 says, what supplements do you take? Do you take, I'm guessing you probably take B12 just because.
Yeah, I take B12. I take, sometimes I take vitamin D, but I usually get enough sun to where it's not necessary. And I think that's it. When I was pregnant, I did take DHA. When I was pregnant, I was supplementing vitamin D every day until I got my vitamin D tested, but my levels were so high that it wasn't necessary, and I discontinued it. But now I only get it at days that I don't go outside. It rains a lot in Costa Rica, so sometimes it rains so much that you just stay inside, and those days are when I supplement.
Great. Latif says, should we not wash mushrooms then before cooking? Because you said they're like sponges,
So the way that you clean them is just different than you would clean vegetables. Like with vegetables, you tend to like run water over them. Or, sometimes like with green leafy vegetables in Costa Rica, we basically put them in like a salt bath to kill any microorganisms that might be on them. But with mushrooms, what you want to do is take like a damp cloth and just wipe away any of the dirt that they might have. And then after that, cooking them. The medicinal mushrooms that we talked about would be cooked you can clean them like that. And then if you're going to make like a tea out of them, you cut them up and then put them in water and have them at a low simmer for like 1 to 4 hours, depending on the size of the pieces. And any bacteria should be killed during that time.
some mushrooms are poisonous. How did people like even think to eat them? That's like, didn't see, like, what did people do? Just forage and then find out later which ones were poisonous?
That's exactly right. Yes, basically. There's one main one that is extremely poisonous, but it has a very bright red color with white dots on it. And it is it can cause hepatic failure, so liver failure. But I've never seen that in the wild. And that's like one thing about foraging, that if you're going to forage for mushrooms, you really need to learn about like the anatomy of the mushrooms before you just go and pick them out willy-nilly. It's better to go with somebody who's knowledgeable first, or to ask your local mycology center what types of mushrooms are found in that area, so that you can have an idea of what to look out for.
Great, thank you. But she wants to know, do you take mushroom supplements too?
Oh, yes, I do. Actually, I take all 5 of the ones that we were talking about. I have found that when I have menstrual cramps, reishi helps a lot. I take about 1.5 grams when I have menstrual cramps, and that they go away within 2 hours. Reishi also helps me when I get headaches, which is not that often, but it's what has helped me the most, and it's pretty amazing. I don't know. I wish that I would have learned about this in medical school and would have been able to tell more people. And now I'm glad that I'm able to share the information with others.
Well, how did you get so interested in mushrooms?
I learned about some of the health benefits a few years ago. And honestly, with learning a lot about big pharma and how kind of corrupt they are, and how they force policy change, and it made me realize that a lot of what I learned in medical school was not necessarily accurate or true, and that a lot of traditional ways of treating diseases, like they've been doing in China for thousands of years, were probably right, even though we don't necessarily have all of the clinical studies for every single use of each of the medicinal mushrooms. There's a lot of empirical evidence that these substances really work. And while we are getting more and more scientific research done, and the results are very promising, I tend to I tend to believe in the empirical data that has come out of thousands of years of treatment using them. And I don't know, I think it's just really interesting. And yeah, I hope to continue to learn about these, about more mushrooms, and maybe next time I'll be able to talk about different types. There are thousands, millions of fungi, really. Just that for medicinal purposes, there are probably thousands, and I only talked about 5 today.
Wow. Well, if they're so good for you, why do they have to taste so bad?
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's a protective factor for the mushrooms. Mushrooms are so important for our environment, and so much of the biodiversity has gone away because of deforestation, because most mushrooms grow off of dead wood and decomposted materials, that when we deforest, we remove a lot of the biodiversity and the fungi in nature. But I imagine that the bitterness comes from the mushrooms the mushrooms basically like trying to protect themselves from getting eaten.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like when you see mushrooms just growing outside, probably shouldn't eat those, right?
No, probably not. It really depends. If you can see a mushroom and say, wow, that's this mushroom, then you could probably eat it. But if you're not sure about it, probably not.
Right. We have a great question from Dr. Daryl. Is it okay to use mushroom powder, and is it as nutritious? Because I wouldn't mind putting the powder like in a soup, stew, or chili. I just rather if that's as nutritious as eating it.
Yeah, it is as nutritious as eating it. And for the medicinal mushrooms, you don't have to eat them at all. I only take supplements or use a powder form. I don't really make teas. I don't really have access here to the whole like fruiting bodies of the mushrooms. So I buy the powders, the tinctures, and the capsules. So, but yeah, they are as nutritious. You have to look out for additives if you buy powders. Sometimes they can use starches as material, basically to culture the fungi. So sometimes they'll have be basically mostly starch. So you have to look out for that in the label. But for example, right now I'm taking a reishi supplement that has 4 parts starch to 1 part reishi. So you just need to take more of the capsules to get the same health benefit.
Great, thank you. Question from Marcy: is boar's head as nutritious as lion's mane?
You know what? I actually don't know the answer to that, but I don't know what I would have to look more into that and answer that later.
Okay, thanks. A lot of people are commenting on your pregnancy that 20 pounds is a very small amount of weight to gain. Is it? I don't know much about that.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's considered in the like normal range, but yeah. And then I lost that weight basically by breastfeeding and when I was breastfeeding, I was still really hungry the whole time, but I still lost the weight again after my baby was born. Mm-hmm.
Terrific. San says, what do you know about Leotoporus mushrooms? I heard they're called chicken of the woods.
Honestly, I don't know much about chicken of the woods. I know that they can be adaptogenic as well, as we were talking about, and they can be a good prebiotic. But beyond that, I'm not sure. I think they also have a lot of antioxidants, but I'm not sure what the ORAC value would be on that.
Great, thank you. Susanna says, does a day go by where you don't have mushrooms in your diet?
Some days I do forget to take the supplements, but I try to incorporate them into my everyday life because of the long-term benefits. And maybe that's part of why I look so young, because of the antioxidants. The antioxidants really help with preventing cellular aging. So
yeah,
I don't know.
That's so interesting, because people talk about people in the plant-based space about that we're aging in reverse, and not to be vain, but like I look at pictures of myself from 20 years ago and I think I look better because I've been eating better, so talk about how that really works, because I eat a lot of mushrooms, but I just saw a picture.
I just saw a picture of myself from 7 years ago with a picture of my friend, and I just said to her, like, oh my gosh, I look so chubby in that picture. And I don't know, I definitely think, I don't know if I look younger now than I did then, but I definitely think I look better.
Well, let me tell
I
you,
look more healthy.
I thought you were like I said, 22 at the most. So definitely look young. So do you ever put balsamic vinegar on your mushrooms? Because Thomas Allen, who actually is the
I
owner
love that.
of the company
Absolutely.
that makes it, but they do taste better to me with balsamic vinegar. So here's a
Yeah,
question.
like on portobello mushrooms with balsamic vinegar, very good.
Yeah. Marinate them in them even, and then grill them or air fry them. Shai says, any particular mushrooms good for pregnancy?
Actually, yeah, all the ones that I talked about today, but especially reishi. Reishi can have really good effects on hormonal health and hormonal balance, basically. So they can help with a lot of the nausea that comes from pregnancy as well. When I was pregnant, I had not yet learned about, I don't think I had learned about the hormonal effects of reishi, and I wasn't supplementing, and I wish I would have, because as I said earlier, in my first trimester, I was so sick. I could not keep anything down, basically. So I wish I would have known back then.
Wow. Here's a question. Have you ever talked to, where did it go? Somebody named Dr. Paul Stamets, a mushroom expert?
I would love to. I listen to his lectures all the time, and I think he is so interesting, and he is so passionate about the subject. He really was the one who opened my eyes about the environmental importance of fungi. And he talks about how turkey tail basically saved his mother's life from breast cancer, and he is doing great work. And he's also using his research in mushrooms to help bee colonies basically replenish, which I think is amazing.
Wow, that's neat. I have to look him up because I have a friend whose mother has breast cancer and I haven't heard of him. Maybe I can get him to come on the show and talk about
it. Paul Stamets, very interesting man. I recommend his lectures, and his he was on the Joe Rogan podcast a few years ago, and it was very interesting.
Great, thank you. So people like Deepak and Dorothy are asking, like, can you actually show the supplements you take? But I'm thinking if you're in Costa Rica, the brands may not be the same in the United States.
So some of them I actually did buy when I was in the United States. I don't have them here with me where I am, but I have, I take Tonic, TONIQ. For one, there's another one. Paul Stamets has a line of mushrooms in the States, which is very good. What is it called? It's called Host Defense. His line is Host Defense. But there are several other different brands that you can buy from. Those are just the ones that I am buying from at the moment. Just you want to look at, so what I was talking about earlier is you want to look at which of the product of the compounds that they have. So if they have beta glucans, if the mushroom that you want to eat has beta glucans and doesn't have the terpenoids, then you don't need it to be dual extracted, and just a hot water extraction is enough. But if it has the terpenoids as well, then you want a dual extraction. So sometimes when you buy supplements, it'll only have one or the other and not both. So you want to find one that has both if they have both of those products.
Well, maybe we should change your name from Dr. Miranda Graham to Dr. Miranda Mushroom. You know?
Well, my brand is actually the Vegan MD.
That's great. I love it. I've been posting the link to your website. There's a vegan chef named Eric Tucker from Millennium Restaurant that loves mushrooms so much to cook with. He has them tattooed all over himself.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So somebody who tuned in late said, how did you lose 60 pounds? So then rather than tell the story again, which we know is from being a junk food vegan, ethical junk food vegan, to eating more of a whole plant foods, maybe you can ask the question that all our guests get asked, like, what do you eat in a day? Because I'm sure that is what caused you to lose the 60 pounds.
Well, yeah. So basically, Well, I live in Costa Rica, so I eat a lot of local foods. I eat a lot of fruit, watermelon, pineapple, bananas. I eat a lot of beans. The biggest change was just not adding oil to my foods. I don't even have oil in my kitchen at all. And I think that it's better that way. When I get overt fats, they're from nuts, seeds, avocados. So here in Costa Rica, they have a traditional meal called gallo pinto, which is rice and beans, garlic, onions, red bell pepper, cilantro. But they put a lot of salt, a lot of something called salsa lisano, which is similar to like a Worcestershire sauce, but it's a vegan version of that. And just a lot of oil. So I make like a vegan, not vegan, that's a vegan version already, but I make a healthier version of that, and I can eat that every single day. My daughter also really loves it. I also eat a lot of tofu, and I eat a lot of smoothies. I know that smoothies can kind of be a controversial topic, especially if you're if you need to calorie restrict, they're not necessarily the best thing to eat. But for me, sometimes I have a hard time getting enough calories. So for me, smoothies are a great way to, I make a smoothie in the morning and I can have that on my way to work. And make sure that I'm getting enough nutrients. So it's also a great way to hide greens for my toddler, because she likes broccoli, but getting her to eat kale.
Wow.
Very
Mary
difficult.
says, how many mushrooms or cups of tea made from mushrooms do you recommend a day? And I've heard of something called mushroom coffee. Is that just as good as mushroom tea? And can you drink too much of it?
Yeah. So it's not so much that you would drink so much that would be harmful for you. It's that once you consume a certain amount, it's not like you're going to get extra benefit from it. So they don't suggest taking more than 5 grams of any given mushroom per day. But the normal dosage of mushrooms of each type per day would be 500 milligrams to 2 grams. But it really depends on, as I was talking about earlier, the way that they're made. So some are going to be like a more potent formula, and others are going to be a little bit more diluted. So you really need to look into that. But between 500 milligrams and 2 grams should be where you're going for each one. And beyond that, it's really diminishing returns on the health benefit it's going to have versus like the cost of the mushrooms.
Great, thanks. Do you have any recommendations on your website for supplements? And people are asking if you take, like Bullion says, do you use anything else like maca, chlorella, spirulina, moringa, anything like that?
So moringa, I can get very easily here, and I do use that. I throw that into my smoothies, and it has a lot of iron and antioxidants and phytonutrients. Maca is also very healthful. We get a lot of aloe here, which is very healthy as well, but it's so bitter that I just throw it in smoothies because eating it raw is, yikes, very bitter for me. I'm sorry, what was the other thing he asked about?
Chlorella and
chlorella.
Right.
I do not eat chlorella because I think that based on some studies that I've seen, it seems more like it could be a health risk, especially in pregnant women. And since I am a young woman, I tend to not consume that kind of thing. But chlorella might also be helpful, but I tend to avoid it. And it doesn't seem like the benefits of chlorella would outweigh the risks. So I avoid it. But I do eat other foods like nori and other antioxidant rich foods.
And did you mention maca? I can't remember. And spirulina.
Yeah, I did say maca. Yeah. Maca usually in smoothies is the easiest way to use it, I think. When I make my smoothies in the morning, I put a lot of ingredients in it. I put soy milk, I put tofu, I put ground flax seeds.
Nice. And did you say anything about spirulina yet?
So spirulina, I don't use either.
I think it was Dr. Goldham or somebody I had on the show that was not a fan of it, and I don't remember why. Jill says, do you want to comment on buying mushroom mycelium products versus fruiting bodies?
Okay, so some of So the way that the anatomy of a mushroom tends to be is that the fruiting body, if we think about the comparison to like a plant, the fruiting body would be like the apple off of a tree, and the mycelium would be like the roots of the tree. So the mycelium is like you tends to be like underground, except for in the example that I gave of chaga, which we actually eat the mycelium. So with the other mushrooms I was talking about, we're actually going to be eating the fruiting bodies, not the mycelium. And we leave the mycelium there and they'll continue to grow fruiting bodies. If we remove all of the mycelium, we might be removing the ability for that to replenish.
Terrific. Brilliant wants to know, do you take the moringa in powdered form or as a whole plant? I think I'm having an expert on moringa coming on very soon, as a matter of fact.
That's cool. That's really awesome. I would love to hear that talk. I buy it in the leaf form, and then I just put it in my smoothies. In the United States, it's very easy to find. I think it's easier to find as a powdered form, and I don't think there would be anything wrong with using that. The way that it is here, I can go to the farmer's market and get moringa leaves, and it's just easier for me.
Oh, here's a great question from Randy. Is there a supplement with all 5 of the mushrooms you recommend, or do you have to take them separate? That's what you should do, is make your own supplement with all of them, because I hate swallowing things.
Oh yeah, that is, maybe I should do that. I've actually thought about doing that, and I think it's a great idea. The thing is that so for example, I don't recommend taking multivitamins. I think that multivitamins are an easy way to get a lot of things that you don't need. And I think that it's more beneficial for people to take on an individual level the things that they require for their health concerns, which is why there's not like a compounded mushroom supplement that I recommend. And even if that were the case, if it were in one pill form, let's say, it would be really big, because you would be getting like, let's say 5 grams of mushrooms in one supplement. So in that case, it is kind of easier just to take the smaller pills. I also hate swallowing pills, but I just I just drink it with a big glass of water or my smoothie, and I just say, this is for my health, and I swallow it.
Do you feed your 3-year-old mushrooms?
Yeah, I do. I don't give her the supplements though. Not that she can't have them, I just don't. I think it would be more difficult for her to, try to swallow that, or the bitter flavor of them would turn her off to whatever she's eating. But she loves portobello mushrooms and cremini mushrooms and button mushrooms and shiitake. She loves shiitake mushrooms.
Great. And Mari says, what about aswanda, or I don't know, ASWANANDH is the way it's being spelled.
Wanda.
Maybe ashwagandha. Maybe they mean.
I'm not sure what that is.
Okay.
I'm not sure which one that is.
And Willie says, what are the dangers of chlorella?
Chlorella. Actually, you know what? Now that we were talking about spirulina and chlorella, I think I was confusing the two. I think spirulina was the one that had the neurotoxic effect, not chlorella. Chlorella, I think I actually don't know as much about. I know that it's rich in like iron and protein, but I don't know what you can get from chlorella that you can't get from other greens, and what from moringa, for example.
Right. And how much moringa do you recommend daily?
So I do about a teaspoon a day.
Great. Thanks. Do you have time to exercise? Because we're so busy taking mushrooms. I'm just kidding.
I walk a lot. I walk a lot, and I do yoga. Those are my main forms of exercise.
Yeah, I love yoga too. Well, this is great. Well, thank you so much. It's been very interesting, and I'm going to give mushrooms another chance. Where would you like to send people? Are you active on Instagram? We put all the links in the show notes, but most of the audience is in the US, so they.
Yeah, so I have a page on Facebook. It's called Plant-Based Medicine and Nutrition. I also have an Instagram, which is the vegan_MD. And I have my website, theveganmd.com. And if you have any questions or would like a consultation, you can message me through one of those through one of those pages.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Graham. It was maybe you come back and do like a cooking demo with all those different mushrooms sometimes. That would be really interesting.
I would love to do that.
Great.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you all for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back in 2 hours at 2 p.m. Pacific time when we have Nick DeVorn from Local Spicery, who's going to be making a Japanese hot pot. So do you have any other ethnicities of food in Costa Rica? Like, do they have Japanese food there or other different kinds of cuisine?
Yeah, there are a lot of more Chinese food. There are a lot of people from China and Taiwan here, and and a lot of Caribbean food as well.
Oh, that sounds great. Thanks so much, Dr. Graham. Take care.